Welcome, everyone. My name is Janna Fritz. I am the new brand president for DF Seeds. Thank you for joining us for our new podcast. We are calling this podcast DF Seeds, Sowing Seeds of Success in Michigan. We appreciate you joining us and learning a little bit more about our company. Today, we are talking with John Diehl. John is the founder of DF Seeds. And we're excited to have him on the podcast so that we can learn more about the origination of our company and his contribution to the soybean industry as a whole. Thanks for joining us, John.
I'm happy to be here.
Very good. Very good. Well, let's go back pretty far in history. Not too far in history. You're still a young man there, sir. But you are also a Navy veteran, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. So when you first got involved with DF Seeds and the growth of this company, you were also with the Navy and the P-3 patrol plane, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Well, tell us how your experience in the Navy led to your involvement in the seed industry. How does one connect to the other?
Well, the Navy taught me several lessons. Where we would take off and fly for 10 to 14 hours over open water. Pre-flight of the airplane was critical because there's no gas stations in the sky over the oceans.
Right.
It taught me to trust the people that I flew with, because if one person made a mistake, they all paid. And it also taught me to do the job right. And another thing the Navy taught me, my dream growing up was design red tractors for International Harvester. I co-opted with International all the way through college, and then I really wanted to sell red tractors. So I went through their dealer trainee program, and I discovered one thing, and I didn't realize this until I was in the Navy. The Navy controlled my life less than a major corporation giving you a franchise. This is John Deere or International, doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm.
But they controlled my life. And then I also discovered that I wanted to come back to Dansville to raise my children, because I wanted my kids to have what I had growing up.
Excellent.
So,
excellent.
And I'm still very close to the people I flew with.
Excellent. Very good to hear. Well, thank you very much for your service. I always do like to thank the veterans because they have built this country and given a profound sacrifice to those that have served. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So as you got into the seed industry, there was a Dr. Moore's TZ school, correct? So tell me more about Dr. Moore's TZ school and how that impacted your approach to seed analysis. What is Dr. Moore's TZ school first?
Okay, Dr. Moore's school was that he discovered a way by soaking a seed in tetrazolium fluid that it would expose the living tissue of the plant. And healthy tissue would be respirating slowly and would be pink, and bruised tissue that's respirating fast and dying fast would have a dark red color. And when I came back to the farm, they already had a seed plant. Like all people getting in the seed business, they thought they could produce and build a plant. That was the easy part. The hard part was selling.
Sure.
And a lot of them failed. And so I saw this school and I wanted to learn about the seed business. I'm an engineer by education. I knew nothing about seed physiology.
Mm-hmm.
So a year out of the Navy, I took his class. In the TZ test showed healthy seed from non-healthy seed, bruising of seed, and how it shortens life. I don't care if it's an orange or an apple, anything bruises if it's impacted. And how in a soybean you wouldn't think it would affect yield, but it had a great effect. And the ability to see weak tissue, it would tell you the age, whether it's a young seed or an old seed.
Okay.
And when you're holding seed to plant, that is very critical. Or if you're carrying over seed, that's critical. And it also, the rate of tissue deterioration, especially in white wheat, which is a critical crop in Michigan. It's very sensitive to every dew that hits it,
Yes.
and it deteriorates very rapidly. And so it shows this rapid deterioration. And so the beautiful thing about the seed business is the responsibility of it. You are responsible for that farmer's crop.
Yes.
And I love the challenge of that responsibility.
I,
And so and an example of the how important the TZ test was when there were 2 weeks, Frankenmuth and Augusta, that revolutionized white wheat production in Michigan because of yield. And
okay.
the first year we had it, we had a rain, and we struggled getting the seed dry, and we sent it in for germination. It would germinate at 94, but that's when they were just starting to do TZ tests, and I had a TZ tested, and it showed that the tissue, about 12% of the tissue was deteriorating rapidly.
Okay.
So that meant that 94 germ seed, by the time it went in the ground, would probably be 82 germ. So I made the decision off the TZ test not to sell that seed. I lost about 30 grand.
Oh, wow.
And my partners were really mad at me. They didn't understand. They had said, you had a germ, why didn't you just sell it and get the money? And the whole thing, question of responsibility of what you sell, is very alive and vivid today.
Absolutely. So it's safe to say then, John, that the TZ test, the TZ school helped set you on a path of high
Oh,
quality products, right? Isn't
it,
that
it taught me seed physiology. A true seedsman is somebody that looks at a seed and sees living tissue,
okay?
not a pile of grain to be handled and thrown around. That you have to create an environment to keep this seed healthy and alive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's the difference between a seedsman and a grain handler.
Very good. Very good. All right. So that got you into seed physiology. Now talk about the first plant. So the seed plant,
The
Diehl Fields, right? So originally the
Yep.
company was
And
named
they
Diehl
and,
Fields.
and they bought out the bankrupt Farm Bureau plant, or there wasn't bankrupt Farm Bureau, decided to get out of the business. Well, they had edible bean legs, which the cups were farther apart, and the slow down gearbox on the leg.
Okay.
And they had the narrow screen Super 29D dry bean mills, which arguably even today probably was the most accurate mill ever made.
Okay.
And and um so I set about building bean ladders to lower the grain gently into the bins, and I cut tires in thirds and bolted them to a 2x12.
Well,
And not only did it lower the seed gently, it polished the beans, it rubbed the dirt off, it would knock off peppergrass seed that was stuck to it, and I thought I could to take off black nightshade, which sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't.
yep.
And so I was starting with a good product, but I also discovered that test weight had a big effect on seed quality. So I wanted to put it in a gravity duck. I didn't know how to run one, and when we bought a used Fosberg, which is still in the plant today, and planted it below the mill. Instead of running the mill at 100 bushel an hour, I ran it at 50, and put everything over the Fosberg gravity. And of course, the people are trying to downplay the effect of gravity in the seed business because it's slow, expensive, and it takes real skill to operate.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference in like seed corn, the stuff that comes out of the top of the gravity or the bottom 6 inches of the gravity in corn, there's 40 bushel acre difference in yield.
Wow.
And the same thing in soybeans, the same thing in wheat.
Yep.
So we have to sell the farmer something better than he can create himself that's good for him. And the gravity deck was a piece of that. The dark, and another thing, in any place the beans impacted, like in the bottom of bins, I glued in gum rubber. I put inner tubes. I cut them in thirds and put them at the end of spouts. So when it came out of a spout, it would hit rubber and gently lay into the bean ladder. I
Mm-hmm.
was the rule of thumb is you could stick your hand in, and if it hit hard on your hand, you were hurting the seed. But if it's gentle on your hand, you were probably doing the job right.
Excellent.
And so I became known for seed quality. I worked with Ann Tucker to develop a cold test for soybeans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, between the TZ test and the cold test, I could take a public variety Corsoi, because I was known as the Corsoi King, that could be planted the first week of May.
Okay.
Because back then people didn't plant their beans till the end of May.
Right.
And so they'd still go to their bin, but that first couple days of planting, they would always buy the seed from me.
Yeah.
And that's how we got started. Seed quality is what opened the door for the next step in DF seeds.
Excellent. Excellent. So before we leave the processing, John, for those folks that don't know how soybean seed is processed, can you just take us through the steps? So if a load of seed comes into the plant, what is the first device? What's the first piece of equipment that it goes through?
The first piece of equipment is the person unloading, checking what's coming off the truck.
Okay.
I had a person that was very successful running a dry bean elevator told me that if you just stuck your hand in there and you got a handful of beans, and if you saw one off type, that was probably 1%. And if you saw two off types, that's probably 2%. And
Mm.
then you would keep on checking, and it would, and you could come up pretty accurately on the level of off types that you had in the problem. You also started checking for not for primary noxious weeds, and with wheat, as the wheat had to be cold and smelled good and didn't have any bugs. So you were constantly checking and smelling, and that unloading that off the truck that's the most important piece of equipment, is checking as this stuff gets dumped. And
Okay.
of course, my philosophy, well, I took a course at Purdue in handling in handling grain without damage, and they took away a combine design course that I really wanted. And I told the instructor he was ruining ag engineering, and he hated me the worst of all his students. I barely got a passing grade, but this course is the one I've used my whole life.
Okay.
And so this is how that I wanted to do it. I wanted to elevate once through a bean and drop it through a bean ladder to polish it, and then put it through a premium air screen mill, and running below capacity, because you want to keep the air column as thin as you can, because it doesn't do any good to suck out something light and have it hit another piece and still pass through. That you had to keep the column thin enough that that you could take out the undesirables, and
Yep.
then drop it down so you aren't elevating to get on a gravity deck. And I finally copied the dry bean industry, where we would first make one pass off an Oliver and take the split cut and finish it with a Fosberg, which was far more accurate.
Okay.
And then elevate this again over the bagging bins, and then put it through a spiral separator, which is a shape separator,
Yep.
and then split your bagging bins into smaller bins, so you wouldn't be bagging out of the same bin that you're running in. So if you have a mistake, um, it's still contained and it's not in the bag. And I kept on telling my employees, they're the wonderful people that work with me, saying that a mistake is not a mistake till it gets in the customer's hands. Then it is a mistake.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
a pretty, and I will never yell at anybody for pointing out a mistake, or fixing a mistake, as long as it got fixed.
Yeah.
And so when you switch bins, you check the sample before you switch bins, and so the confidence of having a quality product in the bag was pretty high. And
Excellent.
um and so the when I started working for Asgrow, for 10 years we had custom conditioning for Asgrow,
Hmm.
and production and conditioning. and they were just using a real large aspirator, and when the stuff that they aspirated out, they would try to say they would put over a gravity separator to finish it up. But yeah, that everybody that ever ran a big seed plant believed in gravity decks. But the money people never believed in on what it did to capacity of the plant. But it's not about what you produce; it's about what you sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you had so you're better off to take 70%. And seed operators used to brag about how low their shrink was.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any difference. It's how good what you have in the bag is.
Sure. Sure.
And that was not and still isn't a common mindset in the seed industry. So
Okay. Well, very good. So another, point of advancement was the introduction of rotary combines to improve seed quality in the business. Tell us about that introduction to the business.
Well, after studying seed physiology in the rotary combine rubs the seed out instead of beating the seed out. And
Oh,
so the level of impact in the TZ test gave a much healthier seed.
okay.
And so I love technology. I'm an engineer, and something new always fascinates me.
Yes.
And so we bought serial number 221 and 222 of the rotary combine production from International. And then I shocked people more is that there's somebody called Bish, so you could put the John Deere row crop bean head on an International combine. And then we had problems because I really believe in pushing the harvest window. But because seed the first time down is young and youthful beans, and 2 weeks later it's old men.
Mm,
And so we started having problems with the wrapping on the rotor. So at that time, International had developed a rice rotor. So we put rice rotors in both the combines so we could feed the beans on the front side through the rotary combine.
very
And of
interesting.
course, we always unloaded at half throttle, but but I got a little story that, of course, I was known to be a lightning rod on red. I worked as an engineer and loved red rotary combines.
Yep.
And of course the John Deere people always were in my case. Well, a friend of your parents, Timmy Lyprant, said I can do anything with a green combine that you can do with a red combine. I
Yes.
said, I don't believe it. And he had a John Deere 9500, which had the big cylinder. Then he had a dry bean slowdown kit, because the people at combine dry beans forgot more about setting the combine than the rest of the Midwest. And then he had a 30-foot head on it, and the 9500 could be unloaded at a half throttle. So he did a beautiful job. That big cylinder was kept full. So he made a liar out of me. So in every day every time I saw him after that, he would always harass me about the green combines because he did get the
Mm,
job done.
yes.
And
Yes.
in learning from farmers on tricks on setting the combine, the hardest thing when you find a seed grower is finding somebody that's willing to listen
Mm,
and
yes.
and believe in what you believe in. And we can find a grower like that. They are precious.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Excellent.